Hi everyone, my name is Dave and I had the pleasure of writing a guest post on Kay Klingson's Substack, the Trading Resource Hub. It was titled Journaling Your Mental State, How to Do It and the Benefits of It. The article was published on March 16th, 2024, and this video is a follow-up with the goal being to give some guidance on how to set up Excel to help you track your mental state as it relates to your trading. In addition to what I'm going to share with you in the video, there are some great resources on YouTube when it comes to learning how to use Excel at a higher level, and I'll make sure to include links to the specific channels in the show notes. So let's get to it. Before we jump into working with Excel and pivot tables, I want to take a few minutes to talk about why I believe that tracking mindset data is important, the concept of actionable data, and the use of categories and tags for tracking mindset data on a per trade basis. Discretionary trading is one of the best examples of a performance-based profession that I can think of. And because we are human beings and not machines, our performance is a function of our behaviors, and our behaviors are directly influenced by our ever-changing states of mind. Even the most experienced and disciplined of discretionary traders are affected by the ups and downs of their mental states. So, given the role that mindset plays in decision-making process, it makes sense to me that we should track our mental state on a per trade basis in the same way that we track our entry price, stop loss, and exit price. The goal of tracking data and journaling is to identify aspects of our trade execution process that can be improved upon, which in turn allows us to harness the power of small, consistent improvements in outcome over time. If we agree that our behavior has an impact on our trade execution, how could we not track our mental state? If you're wondering if small changes in performance are meaningful in terms of P&L, consider the following example. If we just switch over here and take a look at this very quick example, imagine that you have a starting account balance of $30,000 and your current average daily net return is 0.5%, half of 1 point. And this is spread over the number of trading days that we have in a year, so approximately 252. You wind up with a net profit of $75,431. By improving your average daily return by 0.1%, so a 20% improvement in your execution process that gives you an extra 0.1% on your average daily return, increases your net P&L by $30,000. All right. So you wind up with a 40% increase in your P&L by providing a 20% increase in your net daily average return. And what that does is that illustrates the power of compounding gains over time. And it is something to think about. As a trader, it is a very important concept. What is actionable data? This is data that, when analyzed and presented in either tabular or chart format, not only provides a statistic, but also a corresponding action. A numerical output that includes guidance on how to improve performance is the most powerful way to track data, in my opinion. This is particularly true in performance professions such as trading and professional sports. In trading, there is only one performance benchmark that matters, and it comes down to a number, your P&L. While there are numerous factors that play a role in determining that final outcome, it is a keen understanding of the math of trading that shows us the way forward. Tracking your mental state in subjective terms is a first step. However, it is turning that soft data into hard, quantifiable data, i.e. numbers, that will make it actionable. Now let's start to take a look at the meat and potatoes of what you are here for, and that is the tags and categories that are used for tracking mindset data. And I'm going to start by saying right off the bat that everyone has a different approach. Everyone is going to use different tags, and everyone is going to use potentially slightly different categories. So what I'm going to do is show you how I do it, and perhaps that is something you can follow, or you can at least use it as a foundation to guide you forward. So in the category department, I have entry process, exit process, trade management, entry error, and exit error. In my opinion, these 5 categories pretty much cover the range of where my mindset or my mental state is going to be affecting my execution. And like I said, you can use these or you can use other ones, but this is how I do it. Now, let's take a look at the use of tags. To start, and most importantly, I want to draw your attention to the fact that everyone is different and that the same tag may mean something different to person A compared to person B. It is therefore really important that you define the meaning of each tag that you use for yourself so that you are applying them consistently. If you don't define them for yourself, you run the risk of having quantified numbers that aren't terribly hard. This is why I'm leaving my tags on the screen in front of you as a guide, but I'm not going to go through each one individually. Another important aspect of journaling your mental state lies in the benefit of correlation between categories. This is where I see the biggest benefit in my own trading. Here's an example. On its own, the data from the exit error category is far less actionable than if combined with the data from the exit process category. Imagine that you have a scenario where 70% of your trades are tagged early exit in the exit error category. On its own, this simply points out that you're getting out of your trades too soon. Now imagine the same scenario, but with 65% of those same trades also being tagged profit stop in the exit process category. Now you have something very powerful because you have an outcome and you have insight into corrective behavior. In this scenario, the use of profit stops is consistently taking you out of trades too soon, and you can look to test alternative approaches to exiting. In my own data tracking, I am always looking for cause and effect patterns because that is what allows me to identify potential modifications to my execution process that will result in measurable improvements. As you start to track mindset data, keep in mind that you will need a large enough sample size to obtain meaningful data. What that number is differs from trader to trader, but in my experience, it will take 30 plus trades before you can start drawing meaningful conclusions and before useful patterns start to emerge that you can work with. So clearly, the first thing that you're going to need is an Excel document where you input all the various data that you track on a per trade basis. And I have here on the screen in front of you a sample file showing my baseline Excel document. And even though this video is going to focus specifically on tracking and charting data related to your mental state, I'll take a minute to do an overview of my own trade journal to provide context around the type of detail that can be journaled and analyzed. And again, if you have questions, please post them in the comments or send a note to Kay, and I am happy to answer where I can. So in my journal, again, this is just a sample data. I track the status, which is done automatically, win or loss, the symbol, which is a user input field, the setup, which is a drop-down menu. Okay, so whatever setups you use, this sample obviously has everything in it. Long or short, and then we have the categories around mental process that we've already gone through. The entry date, the entry time. Now, I don't use to the minute, so I use time zones within the trading day. And everyone's different. You can do whatever works for you, but I use time zones. Entry price, stop loss, number of shares, and then a note on my entry. My particular trade journal allows me to come out in up to quarters. So I can come out in one shot, I can come out in half, third, or quarters. And that's what this is. It's just exit date 1, exit date 2, exit date 3, exit date 4. And then moving along here, shares remaining, average exit, total risk, risk per share, risk percentage, and then the 2R, 3R, 4R targets. This is all calculated automatically based on the data that I've entered on a per trade basis. And then there's my realized R, my position size, P&L in dollars, P&L in percentage, any final notes that I might include on a trade. And then I also track MAE, which is maximum adverse excursion, and MFE, which is maximum favorable excursion. And I won't get into these metrics right now, but I highly recommend reading Kay's stack on MAE, and I will include a link to it in the show notes below. I am a big believer that MAE and MFE are two of the most important metrics to be tracking in a trade journal. They provide a lot of insight into your use of risk and your efficiency around the exiting of trades. Okay, now with that done, let's focus on how to set up Excel so you can track and analyze your mindset data. The fastest and most efficient method of working with large amounts of data and charts in Excel, for me anyway, is using pivot tables, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So to start, you need some data. And in front of you is a sample data set that I've put together, and at the moment it's laid out as a simple Excel file with column headings, formulas in those cells where I want a calculation performed, drop-down lists in those cells where I want to select data from a predetermined list, and finally, blank cells where I want to put free-form data. The first step in creating a pivot table is to identify your baseline data as a table. To do this, place your cursor in any cell that has data in it. Select Insert from the main menu, and then select Table from the submenu. A dialog box is going to pop up identifying the range for your data and ask you if your table has headers. Make sure that the range specified includes all of your data and that My Table Has Headers is selected. This will ensure that every time additional data is added to your master table, that it's going to be included in the new pivot table. So we're going to click OK. And you'll now see that your data has been identified as a table and that the columns are sortable. If you look in the top left corner, you will see that your table has been named. In my case, it has been named Table 7. You can leave this field as is, or you can change it to a name of your choosing. In my case, I'm going to change it to Trades Log 2, since I already have a Trades Log table, as this is going to allow me to easily reference and identify the table each time that I want to use it. The next step is the creation of a pivot table. Click on one of the cells that contains data, and then select Insert from the top menu, and then select Pivot Table from the submenu. A dialog box is going to pop up identifying your table. You can see here how naming your table is helpful, especially if you start having multiple tables to choose from. Make sure the correct table is selected in the table range field, and then select New Worksheet in the Choose Where You Want the Pivot Table to be Placed section. And in this case, it's defaulted to New Worksheet. This will place your pivot table in a new sheet, which I highly recommend to avoid data conflicts as your master data set grows. Click OK, and a new sheet is going to be opened. You can see that a new worksheet has been created and that the new pivot table is ready to be worked with. And so on the left, we have the pivot table, and on the right, the control box for the pivot table fields is open. Pivot tables make working with data extremely efficient and quick. And for this specific project, we are wanting to work with the mindset tags that we assign to each trade in our trades log. We want to create a dynamically updating chart that shows how we are performing for each of the mindset categories over time. And right now, I'm just going to go back as a quick reminder to show you the categories. So these are the categories that we are wanting to chart: entry process, exit process, trade management, entry error, and exit error. So let's go back to the new sheet and make a table for entry process. Right now, the pivot table is blank because we haven't selected any fields. So let's do that. We will first select entry process and drag it to the columns field. You can see that the pivot table now has column headings with each of the data points from our trade journal. Now we will select entry date and drag it to the rows field. And lastly, we will select entry process again and drag it to the values field. The reason that we are selecting entry process twice is because we need the pivot table to identify both the column headings as well as work with the data specific to entry process. We now have a pivot table with the dates that we took the trades, the appropriate column headings, and the data that we assign to each trade for the category entry process. And you'll note that it is displaying the data as the number of times that we selected each item from the drop-down menu in entry process. That is because the default value is set to count of. So let's change this to percentage of column total. We will do that by clicking the arrow to the right of count of entry process, select value field settings, selecting the tab show values as, and choosing percentage of column total from the drop-down menu. Click OK. See how the pivot table automatically updated? As I shared before, the use of pivot tables is a game changer when it comes to saving time. So we now have a pivot table that has all of the data that we are wanting to create a chart for, and it will update dynamically as you add more data to your trade logs sheet. So let's create a pivot chart using our newly created pivot table. Click on a cell within the table, select Insert from the top menu, and select Pivot Chart from the submenu. Select Line, because that's the type of chart that we're looking for, and then click OK. It is as easy as that. You now have a pivot chart that will update as your pivot table updates. I'm not going to get into the formatting of charts as it's a whole other topic, but here are a couple of quick tips. To get rid of the field buttons on your chart, click inside the chart so that the pivot chart field box opens, in which case it's already open here. Select the arrow next to entry date and select hide all field buttons on chart. You can then add chart titles and menu titles as you wish by inserting text. The second tip is you can now copy and paste your chart wherever you wish in your Excel worksheet, and it will auto update as you make changes to your master data file. So for example, you could create a dashboard like this where you have all of your pivot charts, and I'll just show you quickly a dashboard. So here you can see these are all going to be dynamically updating based on the data that is entered in the master trades logs and then gets updated in the individual pivot tables. To copy the chart, simply select the chart. So we're just going to go back to where we created it. So you're going to select the chart, press Control C on a Windows PC, or right click and select copy. To paste the menu, you're going to go back to the desired location, which is the dashboard in this case, and you're going to press Control V. On a Windows PC, or right click and select paste. You can now drag the chart to the exact position that you want it, and you can format it. So to create pivot tables and pivot charts for each additional mindset category, simply repeat what we did for entry process. And I highly recommend having one pivot table per sheet so that you don't run into any problems with pivot tables crashing into one another as they grow. Once you have created your pivot table and your pivot chart and have copied the pivot chart to wherever it is that you want it, you can then hide the pivot table sheet like this. You just right click, click hide, and that keeps your overall document clean. One last thing, if we go to the dashboard, you will note that I have a refresh data button on my dashboard. I click this each time I consult the dashboard to make sure that the data is up to date. I have found that Excel does not always auto-update the pivot tables and pivot charts. I'm going to quickly show you how to add this button. So you can create a button by inserting, you can insert a picture, a shape, an icon, or text. In this case, let's just insert a shape. It doesn't matter what it is. And we'll do that shape right there. You then need to assign a macro to the button by clicking on it. So you're going to right click on it. You're going to select Assign Macro. You're then going to select Refresh All Pivot Tables, and you're going to click on OK. And what this does is every time that you click the refresh button, it auto updates every pivot table and every pivot chart in the entire workbook. You do not need to place a button on every single page or each sheet. So that brings things to an end, and I hope that this helps in your quest to track your trade data in a more dynamic and actionable way. And as I've said a couple of times, if you have questions, please post them in the comments or reach out to Kay, and we will be happy to help where we can. Have a great day.